A warning. This podcast contains adult language, accounts of sexual abuse, suicidal thoughts, and other deeply sensitive material. Please use discretion. Previously on Terminal, the Dying Church Planter. There is no gentle way to say you're dying.
I was told the cancer had spread everywhere. And the doctor, he's like, do you pray?
Richard Pope found out he was terminally ill just 1 month before he was going to launch his new church.
Planning a church. I was too busy, right? I was too busy to be anything but fine.
And so, when he learned he was not fine, he decided to do the most unpastor-like thing of all. He lied.
I didn't tell anybody. How'd your scans go? Oh, they went really well. Everything's good. So I probably for the first time in a long time, just tucked that monster back under my bed, and I did not look it in the face.
It was a curious decision, not just because someone would surely eventually find out, but because Richard should have known better than anyone. Ignoring a monster will not make it go away.
So I used to think that if you don't look at the monsters under your bed, then they're gonna find you. It's better to look at them and make sure they see you. But yeah, that's a huge part of the young Richard story, I think.
I'm Tony Hudson, and this is Terminal, the Dying Church Planter. Episode 2, Young Richard.
Let's go back. Richard Pope, little kid.
Yeah.
Who was Richard Pope, the little kid?
This is not a softball question.
No, we're done with the softball questions.
Oh, sheesh, man. When do you want to start with that? You want to start young, what I was born into? You want to?
Yeah, tell me what you were born into.
Man.
If Charles Dickens was alive today, and if he were to write R-rated novellas about poverty-stricken little boys who experience things poverty-stricken little boys should never have to experience, Young Richard would surely be the title and the main character of his darkest modern-day work. And like any good Dickensian tragedy, this one would begin with the worst of times.
I was born on March 31st in 1997, but actually I gotta back it up even more. My mom had been in an abusive marriage, and she runs away from that marriage, and she ends up working at a carnival. Yeah, so my mom wasn't perfect. No mom's perfect, but my mom tried so hard. She was just dealt a really crappy hand. And at that carnival, she's using drugs, and a guy came at her, and they were friends and took advantage of her. And that's where I came from. My mom would say it like this. She would say that I was an angel that got her to stop using cocaine.
For Richard's mother, it was one step forward and then 2 steps back. When she decided that a carnival was no place for a baby, she took young Richard and went back to her husband.
And he becomes extremely abusive. He's drinking nonstop. So my first memory, young Richard Pope, is SpongeBob's on the TV, and I can actually remember there's an episode, it's Krusty Krab pizza is the pizza for you. I actually remember that song and hearing my mom scream and crying, and I'm sitting in a crib in some dingy motel, and he's just beating the living crap out of my mom.
Sometime after that, young Richard and his mother struck out on their own, bound for nowhere in particular. What followed was an endlessly confusing and constantly changing series of fathers and family friends and boarding houses and crack houses.
Wow, this place has changed a lot. But not really at all either. You know what I mean?
Until there was the Big Blue House on Arch Street in Seaford, Delaware.
It looks small. It looked bigger when I was little and running around.
When Richard was 4 years old, he and his mother, along with some of their extended family, came to live here.
Yeah, this is the closest I've been to that house in a long time. That's crazy. I think it's the first time I'm back here in like 14, 15 years. I don't think I've been here since we moved away.
There is a reason Richard Pope has never come back here, at least not until I asked him to. The Big Blue House on Arch Street is haunted by a monstrous Christmas memory.
I remember the first Christmas where they all lived there. And I remember setting the Christmas tree up together and all this excitement. Everything was awesome. I'll be honest, it was probably, like, until that point, probably the happiest thing I can remember. Somehow we had this big Christmas tree, and like you see the lights, the floors were polished recently. So remember the lights reflecting off the floor? It was such a wonderful time. And so me and I called them cousins. They weren't by blood. But me and my two cousins were like, we're going to stay up and we're going to catch Santa Claus. And they fell asleep. And they ended up going to bed because they didn't want to get in trouble. But I was like, I'm going to stay up and I'm going to catch Santa Claus. Those losers. But Santa Claus never came.
He doesn't remember how long he waited all by himself. But he does remember a tap on his shoulder. And he remembers turning around. And he remembers seeing an adult family member standing over him.
That night, while I was waiting, I don't know how to say this. Yeah, the proper term would be rape. He sodomized me. Right there. Yeah, right there in front of the Christmas tree. So I really struggle with Christmas now. I hate Christmas Eve services. I love preaching them, and I love being busy on Christmas. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and there's so many thoughts, even now as an adult, where I'm like, man, maybe I should have fought him. And I'm like, man, he was like 20-something, and I was like 5 or 6. And because of just some pains I was having, I mean, you might have to cut this out, Tony. I mean, it's not natural for a 5-year-old boy's... You know what I mean? So there was just a lot of, like, mess, man. And they ended up finding it out, and they asked me, and then everything changed. I went to, like, the victim support counselor, and we did all the stuff. I mean, I remember talking to people, and, you know, that my mom didn't want me to go on the stand just because of how scared I was and how messed up I was. And as a kid, you don't really understand the judicial system. I know he went to jail, but it didn't go for long. And sheesh. Sorry, Tony. I debated with Peyton what parts of the story to tell her or not. And my wife's so much wiser than me. She said, when you tell the story, you have power over it. And I believe that. And I tell this story all the time. It just feels weird just telling it and not know the people who are going to see it. It's like, what are they going to think of me? I guess it doesn't really matter. Should I keep going now or what? I gave you a lot. I'm so sorry.
For Richard Pope, there will always be ghosts of Christmas past. on Arch Street.
I lived in that blue house, so everything that happened, that's where that happened on Christmas Eve. So, yeah, wow. Well, that's it, man. Thousands in therapy, and I still don't like this place.
Places have power. Across the street from young Richard's childhood home, there is another house, a 3-story Victorian with peeling paint, a tilted back porch, and a slightly sagging roof. 20 years ago, this was also a place that had power.
We got really close with neighbors across the street. Miss Ruthie. Really sweet old lady, and she was like a grandma to me, and she'd ask me to read her the Bible. So, like every day, that's what I did. I'd eat cookies and cream ice cream, and I'd read her the Bible. And we'd go to church once every like blue moon, like 3 times when I was a kid. I didn't go to church, maybe 2 or 3 times as a kid. And I was so angry and sad all the time. So definitely gospel seeds were planted by that lady, and I think she was trying to point me to something way stronger than myself. But here's where it gets wild. Trauma actually alters your brain, and it creates pathways that didn't used to be there. And this is not to diminish trauma of adults, but the younger you are, the less trauma it takes. So around that time, I started having hallucinations and seeing things that weren't there. And Ruthie, I remember her saying this constantly to me. She said that if you don't look at the monsters under your bed, then they're going to find you. It's better to look at them and make sure they see you. So, wise words from an older saint. And that kind of became like how I lived life. I'm like, Granny Ruth would say, look, you look that monster in the eyes and you don't let it look away. But like, I was convinced that was by my power. So I was living life like that without anything to back it up.
And so that is how the comparatively small monster called puberty turned out to be no match for young Richard. High school athlete? Check. Star student? Check. Adolescent ladies' man? Check.
Yeah, I was the man. I was skinny too. I was hot back then. I mean, I was 6. Don't say that. I was in 6th grade. That's weird to say I was hot. But like, I was hot stuff is what I'm saying. But I had this very aggressive, assertive personality. You know what I mean? Like, I was so like demented and twisted and angry because it's easier to be angry than to be broken. You know what I mean?
Demented, twisted, and angry young Richard was now a ticking teenage time bomb. And so it makes perfect sense that this would be when Richard's monsters declared all-out war.
So I'm a freshman, and this is like the sudden drop. I come home from school, get off the bus, and my mom tells me that Mikey, who was my older cousin, had just hung himself. That was my best friend. Mikey was awesome. I love Mikey. And went over to the house. I remember watching his twin sister sob on the floor. I remember looking at the hook for the punching bag where he had hung the noose in his room. I mean, just, yeah. And I was just so cold towards it all. I was sad. But you got to look it in the face. You know what I mean? You just got to look it in the face and make eye contact with it and not let it look away. So I did what I was told. And I had never felt so small, man. Because that monster was just bigger than me. Yeah, so Mikey's funeral packed out. And I know what it was. Nobody cared about Mikey. All these people came to Mikey's funeral. I don't know if they had seen him in years. So I wanted to be cared about. And I was like, I know how to get people to love me.
A butcher knife in the attic was young Richard's first ever suicide attempt. And God, please let me die was young Richard's first ever prayer.
It's the first prayer I remember praying, God, if you're real, let me die. And I don't know if it was supernatural or if it was like human natural fear. I literally remember putting knife to arm and I'm just like, go in. But I just couldn't do it.
The police came. His mother cried. An ambulance took him to the hospital. Young Richard's first suicide attempt was unsuccessful. And so, several weeks later, he tried again.
Yeah, I end up running into the woods. I left a suicide note, and I was like, if I can get far enough away, I can die. So I ran away, and I was somewhere in the Gumboro Swamp. They call it the Witches Swamp in Delaware. There's legend about witches and blah 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 blah. Legend and myth and folklore. It's a pretty scary place. I literally remember hearing a chopper go overhead and hiding under a tree. That was Delaware Chopper 2 from the Delaware State Police looking for the runaway kid who was going to kill himself. That's how serious this got. There were like people searching for me in the woods. And they found me. And this guy, he drives me out of the woods. I get put in an ambulance. And I kept telling people, I kept lying and saying, oh, I couldn't remember. I don't remember why I ran into the woods. I don't remember anything. I remembered why. I wanted to not be here. I wanted to die so bad. I didn't want to be found. Maybe I didn't want to die enough. Whatever. And yeah, that is young Richard.
A modern-day Charles Dickens could not write a sadder story than the story of young Richard. There is abuse and rape and suicide. And there's a haunted house, a witch's swamp, and finally, assorted mental health facilities, where young Richard would not live happily ever after. The end. Or perhaps not. On the next episode of Terminal, the Dying Church Planter, Harold is probably not the most common name for a monster.
Yeah, and I'm like, what is wrong with you, dude? Like, stop!
But what came next was acne and Aristotle, and frozen pickles and flying spatulas, and other extremely unexpected, unthinkable things.
He just looks at me. And here's what blew my mind. Never once did he look away from me. And I had no defense to that.
How to Kill a Monster. Coming up on episode 3 of Terminal, the Dying Church Planter. You can find photos, videos, and other bonus material. And you can learn more about church planting with Send Network at terminalchurchplanter.com.